Welcome back to Adaptive Humans, the podcast for real talk and intentional growth. I'm your host, Jami de Lou. Today, we're exploring the future of work through the lens of flexibility, connection, and inclusion with someone whose work has deeply inspired me. Manar Morales is a nationally recognized thought leader, speaker, and the author of the groundbreaking book, The Flexibility Paradigm. Her philosophy of living your all challenges us to integrate, not fragment, the many roles, values, and callings that shape who we are and how we show up in the world. Drawing on nearly 2 decades of advising organizations, Manar makes a powerful case for flexibility and how it isn't just a perk, it's a business imperative that drives retention, well-being, and innovation. In this conversation, we'll unpack how flexibility interacts with human connection, inclusion, and why that old command and control form of leadership no longer works, and what it truly means to live your all at work and beyond. I had the fortunate pleasure of meeting Manar before she launched the Diversity and Flexibility Alliance in 2012. I went on to become a member, and the companies where I led inclusion and talent benefited greatly from the practices and research that DFA puts out for their members. I've seen firsthand the impact of her vision and the great things that her team brings to so many people and so many organizations. Beyond her professional expertise, I'm grateful to call Manar a friend and someone who I really value as a model of both wisdom and perspective as an entrepreneur, a leader, a mom, and a caregiver. I'm truly thrilled to welcome her to Adaptive Humans today. Manar, welcome to Adaptive Humans. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jami. I'm excited.
Me too. To kick us off, the first segment, Beyond the Bio, this is where we meet the human behind the title. I've had the good fortune of knowing you for many years now. I know you've been a litigator, a leader, and now an author, and shaping how organizations think about the future of work. I'm curious what early influences, whether it be family, culture, pivotal career movement, shaped your conviction that flexibility and whole person leadership are essential.
So I love that question. I would say that my journey with flexibility was both personal and professional in terms of really coming out of a need that I had when I had my first son, which I can't believe was 24 years ago, and honoring all my boys. I have 3 boys. I always have to mention that. It's not just one, but 3. And really at that time, having to decide what I wanted to do and how I wanted to shape my career and my life. And so when I had him, and I was very passionate about being a litigator, and I wanted to find a way to do it in the same way that I had a vision for what I wanted to do as a mom, and how that shaped my desire to say I needed to figure that out in a way that wasn't what society was telling me. It wasn't in the way that family of origin. It was really an internal conversation with myself, and one that I didn't expect, frankly. My visions of what I thought it would be before I had my son and the visions of what
Yeah.
it was after having him were different. I always say, plan in the moment, not too far ahead, because you never know how you're going to be feeling. And so it really took me down this path of I needed to figure out what it looked like for myself. And when I was able to do that, I had other people coming up to me and saying, well, if I could have done it the way that you did it, I wouldn't have left. And I thought, well, why is that? There was nothing unique about what I did or special about it. Can we create organizations where that's true for everybody, not just a select few?
I want to say credit to you, though. Back then, it was unique what you were doing. For context for our listeners, as a lawyer and practicing law, there's billable hours if people aren't familiar with that. And I think about the years I spent inside of law firms, not as a lawyer, but leading diversity, equity, inclusion, talent, and other practices. The biggest struggle around retention often for women, for people from different backgrounds and cultures that had different expectations, more collectivist cultures and things of that nature. There's always this pull on your time. And I always think back to when you were starting the Alliance. And even I remember our initial conversation about how we could bring more flexibility to law firms. And I can remember being at a space in my career thinking, I don't know how this is ever possible. I just think about the influence you've had on some of us, both personally and through the work you've done in the organization, of realizing there are ways to integrate your life and your work more. And there are obviously trade-offs, but there are ways to do more of that, which kind of leads into this idea of living your all. And so when you think about living your all, what does that look like in your daily life? And where did you first learn this idea of integration was even possible?
Yeah, and it's a model I just introduced really, but born on living and feeling it, which was really around the fact that it became very clear to me I had to define what that looked like for myself. And I was sort of tired of the debate of can women have it all? Can they not have it all? No, I believe they can. No, I believe they can't. And it really came down to me to say, look, at the end of the day, you decide what that looks like. So I can't tell you, and no one should be telling us whether we can have it all because what all looks like is as unique as everybody's fingerprint. My all looks different from your all, looks different from somebody else's all. That is a journey that we need to decide and define for ourselves. And it was one that, if at the time I listened to everyone back when I was deciding how to make it all work, I wouldn't have. And so it was that light bulb moment for me of saying, no one can tell you what that looks like. And there's this tension that we have where, we can tell girls you can be anything that you want. And then we tell women, no, you have to choose. I was like, there's a disconnect there. That really was modeling it for myself in my own life. This is what's important to me. This is how I define success. This is what it looks like. And this is what it looks like only for me. It doesn't have to, everybody can be different in what that looks like. Really kind of resonated for me in saying, this was the journey I was on. And can we ask better questions to allow others to engage in that journey too?
I think about how many people might be first generation in their careers, whatever they're doing, whether that is a lawyer or a professional of some kind. And that tension between being told, and I've even said, I have daughters. So I've said to them, like, I feel like we were sold a hill of beans growing up, which you can do everything. And it's like, you can do all the things, but there will always be trade offs, which I think is just another way of saying you can make choices in how you do this. I feel like there's an opportunity, and I think that's so much of what the Alliance is helping organizations get at, which is you have to have the systems and processes and policies in place to support this creative flexibility that can look different for everyone.
I think the thing is around choices is one thing that my father has always said is make a decision from a position of strength. And so I tried to say, look, it's a choice and I get to do this. So it's not about what am I missing out on, is how am I building the life that I want in a way that works for me. And so I try to kind of flip the script a little bit around that I am empowered by the choices I want and then be in alignment with that. And I do think that in organizations too, it's okay, how do we create organizations where we empower people to be seen as whole? Living your all is really a journey into wholeness. How do we see people not as fragmented, but fully integrated into who they are? I look at living your all at three levels. It's at the me level as the individual. I say why it's lead well, live well, stay well, is the leadership part of it is, can I lead myself first so that I can help lead others, and then also so that I can live well in the momentum of staying well. But I think at the organizational level, I think it is important about how do we create thriving so that we could have ambition and well-being sit at the same table and not be considered as opposites of each other, that one is a detriment. It's really that well-being and the idea of creating environments where people can thrive is a driver of productivity and excellence.
I can't agree with you more. As we move into our second segment, the brave enough moment, this is the segment that shows us how important it is to take that first step, that imperfect step, even when you might not feel completely ready. I'm curious, I know many leaders wrestle with this tension between work and caregiving and identity. And I want to use caregiving broadly because it can mean caregiving for, being a parent, but it also can mean so much more because so many are in the sandwich generation of also caregiving for elders or others in their life. Can you share a moment when you stepped into a decision or role that felt like a big risk? When you weren't ready, you weren't sure, but you moved forward anyway?
I mean, I think there are so many that are in all that we do that always feels like a big risk. I think in the first one was probably starting DFA, really with deciding. And for me, it's always, if I get caught up in the how, then I start all of the hesitation, all of the, I don't know how to do this. I don't know. For me, it's really that the moment of confidence comes in the decision. Like the moment that I decide this is what I want to do. And it was the moment I decided I wanted to start DFA. the how showed up because then my brain started to look for it. So I think we can so much get in the way of saying, oh, this is so risky, or let me tell this myself the story of why this isn't going to work. And, from confirmation bias, right? If I tell my brain this isn't going to work, I'm going to look for all the reasons why it isn't. But if I decide this is what I want to do, then the how automatically my brain will start to say, oh, all of a sudden this showed up. All of a sudden this opportunity came forward. All of a sudden this person emailed me. All of a sudden all of these things happened. And so I have been very much in you need clarity first. Just decide on what it looks like, decide on what you want to do, and then we'll all figure it out.
I so appreciate that perspective of clarity first and the how comes after. This whole concept of brave enough moment for me has sort of been about those moments in my life where I've had to take the leap, the action, the forward momentum, which we all have, right? But there's so much about making that choice to move forward, even when we don't know all the details, even if we don't have all of the plans in place. The way you put that together, I think is so important, which kind
Yeah.
of leads me transition to my next question, because I think about the styles of leadership and decision making and this idea of the command and control leader, and that paradigm of it's really not serving the workforce anymore. I think about how much time I spent in my career under leaders that it was very much that command and control directive, and the struggle within myself to measure to their standards while wanting to be more flexible and adaptable, but not really honestly being skilled probably in the ways that you should be, which that could be a whole separate episode for us. But I'm just thinking about this idea of the shift of command and control and flexibility. How does flexibility reshape what effective leadership looks like now?
I think, the biggest example we have that command and control is not working is I look at some of these return to office mandates. I would say it's not working because in order for it to work, we have to create a return on experience and really talk to why does this matter? Why is it important? What's the purpose when we say we want people in the office so that what happens? And in that example, what the shift is, I'm not commanding you to come in. I'm inspiring you and influencing you. I can inspire you with the purpose. I can inspire you with the experience. I can influence why this matters and talk to it from that point of view, which makes a difference. So it's not about you have to do this, you have to do this, I have to tell you what to do. But can we switch to thinking about leadership as influence? Can we shift to thinking about leadership as not always having all of the answers, but asking the right questions so that we inspire the people that are around us, so that we can help influence the decisions that are being made? And that is really a mindset shift, right? I talk about evolving leadership as thinking about what are the mindset shifts that are necessary to lead in this world today. And if we don't continue to evolve, then we don't move the needle. And so that I think is a really important framing. Often I say at DFA, I say, our job is to make sure organizations are having the right conversation. Everybody will come to their own answers on what they need to do. My job is to frame it so that you're having the right conversation and then you can make the decision based upon facts, based upon truths, based upon really kind of thinking about this holistically rather than on myths and fears and concerns that are not actually real. So,
Yeah. What are some of the mindset shifts that you think leaders need to make for flexibility to succeed?
so I think there are three key ones that I think are really important. And the first one is that paradox mindset of yes and. We spend so much of our time just thinking about this is how I work. This is what I need. This is how I'm productive. This is how I'm creative. And we don't think about, yes, you can be creative and productive. And that really is what drives you. And those are the moments that inspire you. And that's how you get your best idea. And someone else could say, these are the ways that I get my best ideas. I would say, I get my best ideas when I give myself time and space to think. That's where my creativity comes in. So rather than saying, the only way to be creative, the only way for ideas to flow is if we're all in a room and we're bouncing ideas off of each other and we're generating. Yes, that's true for some. And for others, something else might be true. And so it's not about making ourselves wrong. It's about widening our lens and our focus to say there's space for a lot of different ways. And we don't have to make each other wrong about it. in order to make it effective. The second one is that flexibility is a responsibility. I think that's a really important one for everybody to be thinking about. It's a responsibility on the part of the organization. How do we create the systems, the infrastructure, the practices in order to make it work? Because it's not a policy shift, it's a culture shift. And so we have to prepare the environment and the culture in order for it to work. On leaders, it means we have to lead in a different way. What is expected of us to lead in the environments that we are in today is different. We have to evolve. We have to evolve that thinking. We have to evolve some of our practices. And that is on leaders to be thinking about, I have a responsibility to not just say I've always done it this way, but to really think about what is being asked of me to lead in today's environment. And the third one is on the individual. It means different things when you are to be successful in an environment where you might not be shoulder to shoulder with somebody. And so what does that look like? How do I need to show up? How do I need to interact? How do I need to connect? How do I need to collaborate? All of those things is a responsibility on everybody. And then the third mindset shift is really around the fact that flexibility is not a trade-off for performance. So this idea that somehow flexibility gives people a pass, somehow it means we expect less of them, somehow it means that they're not all in, is not true. So it's not a trade-off. It should be seamless. It should be the ways in which we are making people perform at their highest level. And so things like that person is not responsive, that's not a flexibility problem. That's an HR problem. That's a performance problem. That person is not available. That person is not visible. All of those things are things that have to be embedded to say that's not what's expected of flexibility. And that's not what flexibility is. This is what flexibility means. So I think those are the three kind of key. There are a number of other ones, but at least the three key ones that I think are.
I think that's going to be so helpful for listeners. It's funny because when you were talking about the yes and, I was thinking about my own journey as a leader. And one of the things I think that you've started to touch on is it's about knowing yourself and then how you serve your team or the collective group that you're working with. And I think about one of the things I came to understand in the yes and, especially in brainstorming and creativity, when we had to go virtual or whether it was in the office, because I was a dancer growing up, I do better and I'm more creative and I can focus and hone in and stay with everyone if I move. And so one of the things that I had to learn to say to the team was, hey, like, I know it probably makes the least amount of sense for me to be the one that writes on the whiteboard while we're brainstorming if we're in person. And I would say, if you guys don't care, like, I'm not doing it to dictate where we go, but it helps me to move. Also, my brain moves like 90 miles an hour and I can go 10 steps ahead. And one of the things that got me in trouble earlier in my career, and can if I'm not conscious of it, is I'm moving fast because people give an idea, I can see how it might implement and go back to where we are in the room all within seconds. So I have to slow down. And so the process of moving both is helping me be creative, but it's also helping me stay present and slow down. When I started to explain that to the team, that I'm not trying to control the facilitation, I'm not trying to direct where it's going. I want to be as much value and service to you all in this. If you're open to it, like, can I write on the board? And it reframed for the team like, oh, Jamie really wants us to collaborate. Because my favorite thing to ask is, someone give me a different idea. Let's pressure test this. I try to live out that principle of different perspectives, make it better, different ideas, different lived experiences. And I think what you're doing is cultivating trust in that yes and. When you're willing to display to others your openness to consider what you need, but also what they need, and live that out. Sometimes you have to talk through the process of why you're doing what you're doing and why of what they need to have that
Yeah.
exchange kind of flow. I just was thinking of that and I didn't know if that felt applicable.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's that, can we also cultivate curiosity, right? So I might do this. Tell me, how do you collaborate? Like, is there, let's open that up to say, when are you at your most creative? When do you feel like you have seen collaboration at its best? What were the components of that? If you've been on another team, share that. Like, when have you seen teamwork at its best? What made that possible? So that actually, before we even go into those kinds of sessions, we're co-creating with our team what that session could look like so that we can bring the best out of it, right? So like, somebody might say, I never get my best ideas in the room. I get them away. Great. Can we open up a whiteboard app that the question that we are going to explore in that meeting, we provide that question ahead of time and give people, some form of, whether it's a Google Doc, whatever it is, some
Mhm.
collaborative document or space that they could put ideas in advance of the meeting. Or for some people, they say, I need to sit back and listen, and I'm processing, and I will get my best ideas in the middle of the night or later. So maybe we keep that document open and say, we just had this meeting for us to come up with this, and we're going to keep it open for the next week, because I know some of the best ideas flow later for some people, right? So it's really thinking about, how do we design differently to say there are different, that's the yes and, right? Like exactly what you're talking about is a great example of it. And as a leader going first, to say, hey, I'm going to lean into how I do this and what makes
Mhm.
it look, and this is why I'm doing it. And as an invitation for all of you to do the same.
I appreciate that. I think that can be really helpful for people in thinking about how they're working with their teams. And I think we underestimate not everything has to be accomplished in the process in the room, the pre and the post, and allowing people to get to their best is really what you're getting at, right?
Yeah.
For sure. I
Yeah.
was thinking about the flexibility paradigm, your book, and people can obviously get even more nuggets than what you're sharing here in the book for sure. My mother always said 4 seasons of knowing anything new. It could be a person, a place, a relationship, anything, and you're kind of rounding out the 4 seasons of the book release and all that has cultivated. And I think about writing a book, just the act of writing a book is a brave enough moment in of itself. But I'm wondering what other things out of writing and now living with the book, kind of being out with others, thinking about the inspiration of what you wrote to sort of how it's guiding what you're doing now. How are you cultivating that inspiration from writing the book?
I'm proud of the book, certainly. I think there's a lot of vulnerability that goes into writing a book, because it's out there and you have no control over it. So for me, that was a big moment of saying there's no control of whose hands the book ends up in, right? And the hope is for it to inspire people in a way of thinking. And people will often say, well, why did you write the book? There's been so much done already on this. For me, it was around this idea that there was going to be a forgetting curve, right? There was another book pre-COVID. I didn't write it, but it was lived in my computer that I was going to write. And I think timing is everything, right? And so for me, even that lesson of a divine redirect of saying, that wasn't going to be the right time for it, right? Like, because COVID happened and it shifted everything in the way that we looked. And I was like, nope, that's not the right book because of everything that we've just lived through. So there were lessons in that inspired me, I think, around that kind of the right timing. Things happen at the right time. And the hope and the lesson from it, is that it just gives a new way of thinking. I knew that there was going to be a forgetting curve. I knew that there was going to be a moment where we were like, oh, that was good. And now it's all done, as opposed to really, can we inspire and shift the way that people think, so it goes beyond just COVID as a moment in time, but that COVID really did forever change the way that we work. And so I'm not sure if that answered all of your question, but
No,
that's
no, it
what
did.
is
And I
relevant.
think I think no, I think the I've often heard you say COVID shifted the way we work and the way that 9/11 shifted our lives and the way we flew. And that idea of, but we do have forgetting curves, I think sometimes with both. And depending, generationally where you were and how present you were and what it meant for you. I do think we're still learning the ripples of the impacts of living through the pandemic. I talked about this in one of the recent episodes. I think people are really hard on Gen Z employees coming into the workplace and on this archetype that we're creating. And I call it an archetype because while there are some skills that Gen Z could use to cultivate, I think we have to remember, where were they supposed to get those skills? That interpersonal, interactive, the human side of things, where were they supposed to get that when majority of them spent maybe in the most recent workforce, college or high school, in a room with a computer and a screen, maybe a tablet if at best. And that wasn't equal for everyone, because you think about everyone's home life has a different access point for all of that. So what we need to bridge gaps probably looks more different than ever before. I know you've led a whole conference around humanizing the workplace. And I think there's
Yeah.
this element connected between this arc of how much do we remember and are we carrying what we learned from it? And then are we rethinking? You and I have something in common where we both experience loss. And when you lose someone or a big shift or traumatic event happens, this craving of going back to normal, but it's never back. It's always a new normal.
And I think that goes to nostalgia can be strong, right? There's no, right, that there is oh, I wish it was that way, or I wish we could go back. And there is a strong pull. And also to remember that sometimes we're looking back with rose colored glasses about how good it was or how good it might have been just for us and realize it wasn't actually good for everybody. So, one, that's the yes and. Maybe you wish things could go back, but frankly, going back wasn't great for everybody. And so I always talk with our leaders and talking with organizations and say, if you want true innovation, innovation isn't about recreating the past. It's designing a new future. We can certainly learn and build and take what was good and build upon that. But anytime that we are thinking about how can I just recreate the past is not a moment of innovation. And so really kind of leaning into that and for ourselves, right? That the world is evolving, we are evolving, the talent landscape is evolving, and we need to evolve along with it. And so, we're doing a lot of culture work now within organizations about kind of defining who they are. And I say, culture should be enduring and evolving. You need to be thinking about what are the pieces of it that I want to keep and what are the pieces, how do I want to move forward? Just as humans, we all evolve too. And at the end of the day, organizations are made up of humans.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, it kind of transitions to our Just Be reset. And this is the segment where we look at and talk about practical resets or renewal rituals that you can start doing right now. When you think about so many demands that are on everyone's time, this idea of living your all can also feel overwhelming if you aren't digesting it maybe bit by bit. What's a simple practice you return to when you need to reset or ground yourself that might help a listener?
Yeah. I think asking the question of what do I need most right now? Like for me is understanding that living your all is sort of the idea of a state of being, not a state of doing. And so it can feel overwhelming when it feels like this is about me doing as opposed to a state of just being and being and understanding that we are that multidimensional and that there are lots of things that are driving me in the way that I show up. And in organizations, it's meant to be a leadership framework to say that we are constantly under competing demands. We go back to purpose. We go back to what matters most. We go back to what do I need in this moment and how do I resource myself? I think is a really fundamental question that I often go back to. Like I have to take a moment and center myself and say, okay, what do I need in this moment right now? To be doing, to be focused on, to be feeling, all of those things have to come into place. And just taking a moment to pause and just ask and check in with myself and ask myself that is really actually very centering and grounding for me.
I think that's a great point. I have a therapist who once said to me, Jamie, are you a human being or a human doing?
Yeah.
And I think too often we're humans doing, not humans being, and learning to be present. Part of why I wanted to create this segment of the podcast was to give people these practical ideas that they can do in their everyday life, that they can do in work. And I think we don't often take enough time to pause and kind of understand the nervous system regulation or dysregulation that might be occurring.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, as you're doing some of this culture work and working with leaders, any other practices that you've seen help the leader support their team and themselves as a way to do a reset?
I mean, the model itself has sort of 9 accelerators built within it. And that one of the moments is that moment of one of the accelerators is around pause, right? How do we lean into the pause? And I think for is understanding that, productivity can happen in the push just as much as it can happen in the pause. Therefore, how are we asking and how are we implementing those moments? I had one leader say to me, I do a lap around the office sometimes. If I feel overwhelmed, and he said his way was just to do a lap. Like he was like, will look at ways that I can walk around and just give myself that moment of reflection. But I think too much is the idea of saying like, this is what's going to work. I would say what works is dependent upon the individual. So let's ask them, or collectively as a team, let's decide how can we create moments of pause. At an organizational level, some people are saying like they set 2 hours and say there will be no meetings during that 2 hour time internally, right? They can't control client meetings, but as a team, as an organization, some have said like during these hours, this is a no meeting time so that people have ability to have space and time to think. Sometimes it's simply doing breath work. Sometimes it's just saying, let's just, we're about to start this meeting. We're all just going to take a collective breath. Can we all just take a collective breath right now? Like just take that. That takes 2 seconds of time. Or can we all just check in with each other on a scale of 1 to 10? How are you feeling? Or, we do in our team meetings. I say, let's start with what's going well professionally, what's going well personally. lots of ways that we can lean into a moment of pause, a moment of connection, a moment of presence to just check us, get us into a mindset that is able for us to be able to tackle all of the things that we need to tackle.
Absolutely. That's great. I'm curious of the thinking about the flexibility in caregiving, the messy middle of it all, and the sort of dizzying that can happen in our lives sometimes. Are there any practices or mindsets that you think help steady yourself when those lines feel messy and blurry for you?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, again, I think it goes to, well, two things I will say. One, high impact, high value. I'm very clear when I think about what I am doing, for example, as a mom, high impact, high value. What is the most meaningful things that I can be doing that I feel are impactful and valued either by myself? Sometimes things I do is because I feel like I get some value. It's important to me to do it, but I also think about my children and say, what do they value? What do I think? I have 3 kids, 3 boys that they're all athletes. For me, it was like, okay, I don't have to drive them to practice, but it really mattered to me to be at the games. And it mattered to them, frankly, that I was at the game or at the meet or at the match, depending on the sport of each of them had different sports. And so I had to take a moment of time to say, that's really what is important to me to be able to do. And what are the other things that I can either, what that I want to do, that I want to deny, meaning I'm just not going to do that anymore, that I want to delegate or I want to delay, right? Maybe that's not something I need to do right now. It's something I can do later. So being really intentional in how I show up and is it in the way that I want to show up? And so looking at each of those things, and I couldn't look at it in a vacuum, right? I couldn't say, well, how do I want to show up at work? I had to look at, okay, how do I want to show up in my life? And these are all of the different identities and roles that I play. And here are my values. This is what's really important to me. And I'm going to look at all of that holistically and then decide what I need to do and how I need to show up in any given moment. Like there are times where I can say, in this moment, what really matters or what is needed from me is that I am present with this particular child, or I'm present with my spouse, or I'm present, or in this particular moment, this is what's happening at work. And I'm really going to kind of be present for these next 30 minutes in this. And so chunking down things and not getting overwhelmed by all of the different things I have has been helpful, at least as a strategy for me, to be able to kind of ground myself and also give myself the grace that I'm doing the best I can. And some days that's great. And some days, I'm like, that was my best. It's just, that's what I got. So,
Yeah.
kind of giving myself that permission.
Yeah.
And I think that gratitude, sometimes I said to my husband, it was, I had an event and did it, and it was very fulfilling. And I said to him, we went on a walk, and I said, my cup is full, but my tank is empty. And I know I need to restore that. That my cup is full, meaning I'm so grateful that everything went so great. I'm so grateful that all of this happened. And I'm going to take a moment to also recognize that I don't really have a lot left in me. And so what is most important for me in this next day is I just need to resource myself and figure out all of those things that it takes for me to resource myself and then, go on to the next thing. So I think those are all things that I try to do to incorporate that get me to where I need to be.
What I hear you saying is in the spirit of being present, it's also about being honest with yourself and the people who are closest to you in this life you're doing about where you are. Cause I think about sometimes the story that we're telling ourselves is that we have to do drop off and the game and all the extra things and that other speaking opportunity and recording the podcast with Jamie. Whereas actually, when we're more present and honest, we can set boundaries. We can think about, what are the I liked that. I'm trying to think back to what you just said.
Cup is full, the tank is empty.
No, it was about delegate and delay.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we think about all the things to delegate. We don't always think about the things that we actually can delay because the story we're telling ourselves is that we have to do everything and we have to do it all right now.
Yeah.
And I think getting honest with that can help.
I also think it's about, and where did that story come from?
Mhm.
So there are pressures, there are societal pressures, there are family pressures, there's just a lot of different pressures that are telling us what we should do, what we have to do. And we're not taking a moment to think about it. And I will tell you, when I decided to leave practicing, I remember sitting with a dear person and I said, guess I'm not going to be partner. And she said, well, was that what you really wanted? And there was a moment in time because I left as an associate, right? I left long before that was going to happen. But there was a moment of time where I had to think, wait, no, I just in my head was like, oh, that was what I was, as if I was like giving up something that wasn't exactly where I thought I needed to be. And so I realized, I was like, that actually isn't my vision of success. I just thought that was what I was supposed to do. And so I'm always really clear on sort of sitting with myself and being honest and saying, well, but is that what you really wanted? Or is that what you were told was supposed to be the sort of banner of success for you?
Thank you for that. Just a couple rapid fire as we wrap up. I'm curious, do you have a phrase or mantra you use when you feel pulled in too many different directions?
The question I do ask is, what do I need most right now? That does actually really center me in terms of what do I need. But the other one is all is well. In this moment, all is well. Got three. I
Mm.
will say all is well. My latest one, do you want to hear the latest one that I sent to all
Yes.
the boys? Because I was
Yes.
like, oh, I just learned this one and now I'm going to do it. I was listening to something around mindfulness and practicing mindfulness. And I was like, okay. And somebody said in that there's a mantra, which I don't, I'm assuming this is true, in mindfulness that says just in the next breath, try again. And I was like,
Mm.
I love that because now in the next breath, we just get to try again. Every breath is a do-over. And so
Mm.
I was like, I that so that one also
Every
lives in
breath,
my
try
head.
again. I like that.
Yep.
I like that. Well, in the spirit, as a parent of Gen Z sons, do you see them wanting to have more integration between life and work and that sort of approach, perhaps more than our generations?
I think for that, I feel like I learn every day from my three boys. Fuels it to me. I'm always like, I just got a leadership lesson from one of my boys, right? Like, so I think I listen to what they want and the way that they see the world with a sense of openness that I think is really that, anything is possible. And let's open ourselves to possibility. And so I do think there's that desire for more than just one thing, right? Like how do we live that? They are examples of living your all. I think they are examples of that in their own ways of living. And then the data tells us we know that what younger generations are looking for is the trifecta of money, well-being, and purpose, right? Like that, all of those things need to come together. And so I see it in them. I certainly learn a lot from them. And that has been, I always say that's the biggest privilege in my life is to be a mom to them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting having daughters and thinking about the times where I've felt, and I think this is that story that we're told, the narrative about as women, and feeling guilt where I'm like, oh, why didn't I realize this earlier? They were so much older and into college and adulthood when I started to figure out, like, oh, I really can't do it all. And I'm burning myself out. And they watched me come back from burnout. And I remember feeling all this guilt and our youngest saying, where was the capacity for you to focus on yourself to do that? And just reminding me about being able to start again and how important it is to be able to do that. And I look at them and their careers and they're aspiring, they want greatness in what they do, both in STEM fields, but they also are boundaried and they want a life. And I look at it and like, it's interesting because I'm like almost envious at times, but it's been interesting to see like a few years ago when I was feeling guilt, I'm like, they didn't need my guilt. I didn't need the guilt. And it doesn't serve me or them really, but it's so easy, I think, sometimes as a parent. And I think some of the gendered messages that can kind of permeate in the stories that we tell ourselves and the things that we kind of believe, the archetypes and the narratives out there. So I think that's awesome.
I think that a lot of that guilt can also be the story we're telling ourselves, right? Like that
Hmm.
is that idea of there's a story I'm telling myself about how I should show up or what I should be like or what I should care about. And I get caught in that story. And I'm like, oh, and exactly right. Like if I'll go back and say to my boys, oh, that happened, and they're like, what? What was that? What are you talking about? I go,
Yeah.
that
They're
lived in
like,
my head a lot longer than it lived in yours, clearly.
right, right, right. They're like, you showed up, you were there, you were doing all the
Right.
things, like you were achieving this for yourself. Like it's all good. Yeah, we're definitely harder on ourselves than we need to be. Well, Manar, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I think there's so much that people will be able to take away from our conversation. Thank you for bringing so much wisdom and honesty to this conversation. What I hope the listeners take away is that living your all isn't about doing everything. It's about aligning your choices with your deepest values and creating connection instead of fragmentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for this platform and all that you are doing to elevate voices. So I appreciate all that you're doing and all you're doing to change the world.
Thank you so much, Manar. What a dynamic conversation with Manar. I'm always grateful for her approach to integrating work and life and her commitment to helping organizations humanize the workplace. It's a mission that we're clearly aligned on. And when I think about today's episode, how we talked about this idea of the stories that we tell ourselves, I just want to take a minute as we're wrapping up to challenge you to think about what is the story that you're telling yourself right now as it applies to your life, to your work, and how you're navigating through the world. Are you being maybe a little too hard on yourself? Expectations outweighing the needs for how you need to show up? And I loved the way she talked about delegate or delay. So, what is it that you might need to delegate right now in your life, if it's at all possible for you? And what do you need to delay? What is really of the highest impact of your time right now? If today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who might need encouragement to bring more of that integration into their own lives. You'll also find the links to Manar's book and work in the show notes. Adaptability starts with presence. In a world full of distractions, take a breath, reset, and keep practicing connection and presence, being present with yourself and those who might help you be accountable to the need to take good care. Until next time, remember, I am brave, I am enough, I am brave enough, and so are you. This is Adaptive Humans, real talk, intentional growth.